Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Connery of BadLeftHook.com. With me is Kyle McLaughlin, and you are watching the final episode, for now, of Figuring Out the Fight. Today, if you've seen our previous episodes, you know that we have analyzed Mayweather versus Pacquiao, which is happening in just under 72 hours now, something like 50-something hours. It's closer than ever. It's tantalizingly close. And so far, we've looked at the matchup kind of through the lens of these fighters' past experiences and whatnot. We've hinted at what we may expect to happen. Today, we are all bets are off. We're going to put our necks out there. We're going to make our final predictions for the fight. And we're going to give a little bit of in-depth analysis as to how these two great pound-for-pound top fighters match up with one another. Kyle, do you want to go ahead and start us off? And let's just say Mayweather versus Pacquiao. I will say, before we dive in, sorry to half throw it to you and then snatch it back, but this fight is interesting to me because these two guys, to me, represent one another's foils in a lot of ways. And so, in addition to having a very culturally important fight, we have a genuinely fascinating stylistic matchup with two guys who seem to possess a lot of the tools that historically have troubled their opponents. So who do you think has the advantage in that, or what's your your initial thought on analyzing this matchup?
Well, I am going to keep it to initial thoughts because I hope that we can tantalize the viewers with maybe a few half-assed semi predictions until we get to the end. Because there's no point, giving them the final bow straight away. This is round one of the fight. We're feeling out just as these two guys are going to, and I think I'm with you all the way. It is very much. I think this is why this fight has always been so big. But this is why it's a super fight, because it's not very often that the stars align for you to have two guys that have ended up at the same weight that at least 5-6 years ago were seen to be still relatively in their prime, and they both have the style to beat one another, or so you would think. People think that Mayweather struggles with southpaws, so much so that we've already done a video on it and investigate whether that is the case. People think that Manny would be diffused against somebody who can outbox him or counter him, and that's the case. We've already done a video about it. And I think that it's still the case now, even though they've slipped to an extent. And I do think they have, and I'm sure we'll explore that as well. I still think that they definitely pose stylistic issues to each other. We're going to see whether Mayweather can coast, whether he can pot shot, whether he can keep a low work rate and rely on accuracy and stinging counters. And we're going to see whether Pacquiao has still got it in him to be a buzzsaw for 12 rounds and utilize the angles. And look, if Mayweather struggles with angles, everybody struggles with Manny Pacquiao's angles. And I think it's an intriguing matchup for that reason. I'll start off by saying to everyone that when this fight was announced, I was very cynical about it. 5-6 years ago, I would not have been. I thought it was the biggest fight to make in boxing, and I thought that Manny Pacquiao would win. We're not going to say now whether I still think Manny Pacquiao will win. We'll see as we go. But when the fight was announced, I was very cynical about it. I assumed that Mayweather had chosen this time to fight Pacquiao because maybe he sees it now. He's a lot more comfortable with the matchup. Leave all the political side out of things and the drug test, etc., etc., etc. When I look at boxing, I look at styles and I look at fights. And I always thought that maybe Mayweather knew that Manny Pacquiao was a difficult stylistic proposition for him. And then maybe now he hadn't. Now we're at fight week, or 2-3 days away from it. I'm starting to think that maybe I was wrong. And I should still be excited because, as you say, these guys can still pose problems to each other.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely in the same boat. I think I probably haven't cared about this fight as much as most would expect, at least, for 1.5 to 2 years. It's been quite some time since I've really felt excited for this fight. Most of that because I kind of resolved myself to the fact that I wouldn't.
We've dipped out briefly. I'm not sure if I'm still online, but I'll keep going. I'm with Connor all the way on that because it's a fact that we all struggled. We all struggled with. I was just saying, man, we all struggled with fatigue. I don't know if it was still recording, but I thought I'd carry on without you. I'm also fatigued with the fight. I know what you're getting at, man. When you're debating it for 3-4 years, you don't give a shit after a while, man. Yeah. Even about people say that's blasphemy, but you don't give a shit.
I mean, you can almost say that the fighters themselves seem to feel that way. Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao don't care about spitting barbs at each other anymore. What few attempts they've made to build up a little drama around this have been half-hearted at best, because at this point there is nothing more to do but fight. But the fact is that fight is still important, and it still matters, and it's still an exciting matchup. These guys are still the best fighters in their divisions. They are still the top pound for pound athletes in the sport. There are very few boxers who are even really vying for that position with them. Maybe guys like Roman Gonzalez. Really Klitschko, and really who else? Who else is touching that stratosphere? No one, and no one's been as dominant or as successful as these two fighters against so many different kinds of opponents and against such a wide array of equally great fighters. So I'm finally excited for it again. I finally feel like I care about this fight. I'll go ahead and jump in with a little technical analysis here. We spoke on a previous episode about how Floyd struggles, in quotations there, with southpaws, or how at the very least he has to adapt his style to face southpaws. And I anticipate that Mayweather will have a more difficult time with Pacquiao than he does with most southpaws he's faced. And I think that, Mayweather's, we always know he limits his skill set. He pares it down. He uses only what works, and what he feels works against southpaws is an even smaller array of tools than what he feels works against other fighters. He's found a few weapons that really work. You watch the last 5 rounds of that Zab Judah fight, and you can clearly see that Mayweather basically found over the course of those 12 rounds a style that easily beats southpaws, at least with relative ease. And he's been beating them pretty easily since then. But he's not faced a southpaw who has the kind of angular footwork of Pacquiao. And to me, I see that as a key to victory for Pacquiao in this fight. I think that he's got to attack on angles. He's got to move on angles before attacking. He's got to take angles immediately after attacking. Mayweather has good footwork, but he is capable of being pushed back into the ropes. He does sometimes retreat in straight lines. He's got very good body positioning, and so he tends to rely on that at times instead of actually moving his feet and changing the position of his entire body. So I anticipate that he will struggle with that, and that's not something most southpaws he's faced have really been able to bring to the table. The only other guys who've been able to give him real trouble with footwork are, I don't know, Emmanuel Augustus gave him some tricky looks. Who else, really?
Judah for maybe 2 rounds or so. It wasn't really angles, but he did pop off to the side, and I think Mayweather didn't like that. So as we alluded to before, or as we explained before, it totally fucks up his whole body position. Basically, if you go out to that side, Floyd is not prepared to see you at that angle and to try and meet you at that angle, and you can catch him on the blind side. Like I said, Pacquiao's great with the right hook. He's great at popping you with a left hand, coming underneath, and then hitting you with a right hook. I mean, I actually do think that Manny's going to try and give Mayweather some looks to preempt his counter punches. I think that Pacquiao is very good at coming under the left hook. We've seen it in other fights, so I think he might hit Floyd with a left hand, preempting that. I anticipated that Floyd's going to come out this way and try and throw a left hook at him, and maybe Manny will come underneath, hit him with right hand and reset. It's really hard, man, because Floyd's so quick with that pull, with the check hook, as people like to call it, or even just a basic left hand counter. Floyd's great at hitting anyone with it, really. You don't tend to see it against southpaws. Manny is hittable, though, so maybe Floyd will be a little bit more offensively diverse in this fight, perhaps.
Well, and that is one tool that we didn't mention. Mayweather does throw a counter left. It's almost like an awkward over-the-top jab or a long left hook. He does throw that against southpaws. His left hand is still a factor. It's not like Pacquiao can just not fear anything that Mayweather's going to offer him. Let's be honest. For all that we talk about him struggling against southpaws have never been the ones who have come close to beating him. Marcos Maidana was not a southpaw. Jose Luis Castillo was not a southpaw. The guys who really gave him tough fights and won substantial numbers of rounds weren't really southpaws. He's figured out most of the southpaws he's fought in a matter of rounds, and some of them he's even had a very easy time with, like Charmbe Mitchell and Robert Guerrero, who didn't really offer that many difficulties whatsoever. On the note of Jose Luis Castillo, Marcos Maidana, I think everyone's got this idea, Kyle, that to beat Mayweather, you've got to pressure him. You've got to come after him. You've got to cut off the ring. You've got to push him against the ropes. You've got to get physical. You've got to fight him because you can't box with Mayweather. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on that for Pacquiao, but I will say I think it would be a severe mistake for Manny Pacquiao to try to fundamentally change his approach to fight Floyd Mayweather. And because, if we look at Manny Pacquiao, he's not a pressure fighter. He's not really a swarmer. He's a boxer puncher with good combination punching, with good angles. He's never one to push you around and get really physical. In fact, I think if there's one area in which he has a disadvantage, a strong disadvantage against Mayweather, it's the infight. He's not actually a great infighter, and Mayweather is. So what do you say about that? Do you think Pacquiao's got to pressure Mayweather to beat him?
Well, I do slightly disagree because I know you have certain boxes that you put fighters into in terms of how you'd analyse his style, but I actually do think that Pacquiao, in some ways, is similar to the Japanese stylist, even though he's not been educated in that school of fighting. He's the kind of guy who will swarm when he lands a good shot, he sees an opponent hurt. He doesn't do that through swarming. He will, as you say, he's basically a boxer puncher. When he lands a good shot and he sees an opponent hurt, I do think then he can turn into a swarmer. Or not an inside fight. A lot of people think that to be a swarmer, you have to be on someone's chest, constantly moving forward, slipping, coming inside, blah, 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 hitting. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Pacquiao can swarm all over guys with combinations. I mean, if you look in the Miguel Cotto fight, he hurts Miguelito, he's on him, and he's just swarming him with punches. Now, I don't think that needs to be how he starts. Like you say, if he goes out with that,
it's a lot of punches off of in and out, back and forth movement. It's a little different than just rushing forward. It's more the exactly. Joe Kawasaki school of swarming, less the Rocky Marciano.
Very, 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 very good point indeed. But there's times for it. I think Pacquiao can win rounds by doing it, but he has to work his way inside. Yeah. He cannot come forward and start throwing once he's got inside the range, because Mayweather's going to pick him off all night if he does that. What Pac needs to do is, and I said this in an earlier video, and I think you may have agreed with me or certainly thought it was an okay hypothesis, is that Pacquiao needs to try and counter Floyd Mayweather. And people are going to scoff. People are going to laugh. People are going to think that we are Pacquiao fans, or that we have no idea what we're talking about, because how can you counter the ring general? How can you counter? You've got someone as quick and as skilled and experienced as Mayweather. Well, guys, look back. That shot that Maidana hit Mayweather with in the last fight, okay, Maidana's an orthodox fighter, Pacquiao's a southpaw. The idea still applies. He did not just lug an overhand right at Mayweather and manage to catch him. He preempted Floyd's counterpunch, anticipated it, and he countered Floyd's counter. Now, Maidana is a smarter fighter than he's given credit for, man. Me and you talking about this off air. Maidana is a smarter fighter than he's given credit for. He's certainly improved in that respect. He's never going to be a ring general.
I think he's always been a smart fighter. I really do. I just think he hasn't had the technical skills to back it up for most of his career. But I think he's always been very good at keying in on what works.
But he's also pretty damn slow. Pacquiao's not slow. Mm-hmm. Pacquiao's a very good counterpuncher as well. And I do think that, hey, he can't overthink things. The reason Maidana succeeded there is because that was very instinctive. He set up that shot. He knew what was going to happen. And Mayweather, by the time he was throwing the counter, Maidana had already begun to move. For people
who may not know, no, you're all right. For people who may not know what we're talking about, there was a sequence in Mayweather-Maidana 2. I believe it was at the very end of the third round.
It was the third round, yes. On the bell.
On the bell, where Mayweather was basically fighting very well off the back foot, moving very smoothly for the whole last 10 seconds, hitting Maidana with these counter rights. Maidana stayed on him, at least within range to initiate a new attack, and Mayweather hung his head forward, as he so often does, waiting to set up that pull counter he likes, where he'll whip his head back and to the left and come over the jab with the right hand. And he pulled back from Maidana's jab and started to come back with the right hand, and as he was throwing it, Maidana was throwing his own right hand. He got his head outside of Floyd's and ran Floyd right into what was a very fearsome and short right hand, and it seemed to knock a veneer or part of a tooth out of Floyd's mouth, and it rattled Floyd. And I think that's the thing. When Maidana landed that punch, there was an element of pressure on Floyd, but it wasn't pressure-fighting pressure. Maidana was really a boxer-puncher for most of that fight. He was coming forward a lot, but he boxed with Floyd. And did relatively well. I mean, especially considering it's Marcos Maidana boxing with Floyd. So the thing is I I think while I say that I don't think Manny Pacquiao needs to be a pressure fighter to fight Floyd, I think there needs to be an element of mental pressure on Floyd for Pacquiao to succeed. And I would describe the ideal Pacquiao performance as Manny as frequently as possible being first and being last. I think that's really the best way to describe the kind of pressure he needs. He needs to lead on Floyd, and when Floyd tries to counter him, he needs to counter him back, whether he can make Floyd miss or whether he gets hit with a counter. There needs to be a sort of he needs to disincentivize those counters, or if he gets lucky, he needs to hurt Floyd when he's countering, when he himself is open. And if he fires and gets countered, he's going to lose the fight. And if he waits on Floyd to lead and fails to counter him, he's going to lose the fight. He needs to make the counters happen, and then he needs to counter them after they are thrown.
I agree 100%. And the thing with Floyd is he's good at feinting. Floyd, I think he gets a lot of credit for feinting. He tends to feint in a way that allows his opponent to come towards him and think that he's open for a shot. Whereas Manny feints in a way that he makes his opponents actually jittery. So I think Floyd makes guys think, oh, Floyd's there, I'm going to hit him, he's ready to be hit, and Floyd wants you to do that. Whereas Manny will feint it away, and he'll move like this, and you know, it'll pop off shots, and it'll come up the soft left hand that you like talking about, and he does that. And I think that potentially that's what he needs to do. Like you say, if he's getting off first, doesn't mean he needs to throw first. He needs to just be there moving. He needs to feint first. He needs to make sure that he's the one moving Floyd around. Because as soon as Mayweather gets you moving in the direction he wants you to, he's won the fight. He is the ring general. So what Manny needs to do is take away Floyd's, not confidence. Floyd doesn't need to think, oh my God, I'm going to lose this fight. But he needs to make sure that Floyd is unsure.
Yeah.
Not unconfident, but unsure. And I think that's the key to Pacquiao winning this fight.
I think that mental battle is very important. We've got Mayweather, who is a superb thinking fighter. But the thing with a thinking fighter like Floyd is Floyd almost always has the luxury of getting to think. He gets to plan. And rather than Floyd getting to think, Manny would do well to make him think. If Floyd has to think and can't fight off of instinct, he needs to think about what's coming next, because that's how Mayweather beats everyone. The thing, we may as well jump over to Floyd's side of the equation now and talk about what he needs to do to beat Manny Pacquiao. To me, Floyd needs to do something that he's always done very well, which is to sort of embed. I said before we began recording, I may as well repeat it now. Boxing is a game of asking and telling. You are teaching and you are asking, and you're asking your opponent how they're going to react to certain things. So, for example, when Floyd drops his hands and leans his head forward, he's asking you if you're going to throw a single jab at his head, and if you do, he's going to hit you with that pull counter. Or he's going to just fake that position and come in with his lead right, or he's going to jump into a left hook if you back up. He's asking you how you react to something like that. And then when Floyd hits you, he will mix up the angle of his attacks, the targets, the speed, the rhythm to teach you what he's going to do. And then he will go, he'll oppose what he taught you in a previous encounter. So he'll hit you to the body, and then he'll hit you to the body again with the lead right, and then it'll be a whipping wide right up to the head, and he's taught you by that point that that's what the body punch looks like, and then you get hit by something unexpected. So Floyd is always great when he can embed these lessons in his opponent's mind. When people start to think about what Floyd is going to do to them next, start trying to think, okay, how am I going to stop it, or what is it going to be? They've basically lost the fight. That's usually the point at which his opponents severely flag. We've talked about him making those adjustments, and it's because Floyd spends the first 3, 4, 5 rounds of most fights figuring out that data, collecting the information on his opponent, figuring out what their weaknesses are, and then by the midpoint of that fight, he's learned what their attacks look like. He's learned what attacks of his own work for them, and he's learned how to attack those, or how to set those attacks up and vary them just enough to keep the opponent guessing. And by that time, his opponents are always playing a game of catch up. That's Floyd with the initiative, and that's why I think Floyd's a better outboxer than he is a counterpuncher. And most people, we think of Floyd as a counterpuncher because he counters very well. He uses that shoulder roll and that right hand. But, given the choice, Floyd Mayweather does not like to be stuck in counterfighting situations. He likes to always have the initiative. He likes you to be reacting to him, which is not what a counterfighter wants. He wants to react to you. And so, to take that away, it's a tall order for Manny to take that away, because we've never seen Floyd Mayweather fail to teach those lessons and ask those hard questions when it gets into the middle rounds of a fight.
I agree, but as we also said in the video about Floyd taking on southpaws, Floyd doesn't really tend to collect data on southpaws, or as you would say, data, as the first few rounds happen. He actually lays the foundation straight away. So whereas usually against an orthodox fighter, he would devise a game plan. After the sort of Zab Judah fight, he tend to think, right, like you said earlier, this is what works. And now against the southpaws, he tends to immediately lay the foundations for a successful game plan before the fighters even had a chance to start off. And a lot of people are saying, well, Manny's going to sweep the early rounds. Well, I suggest they go and watch the second Tim Bradley fight again, because in the first round against Tim Bradley, Manny didn't really let his hands go very much, and Tim arguably won that first round. So Tim Bradley can win the first round. Oh, yeah, Tim Bradley takes more risks and et cetera, et cetera. Tim's maybe a more comfortable, if not more capable, fight off the front foot than Floyd Mayweather is. Certainly not more capable, but he might be more comfortable taking those risks. So is it a given that Pacquiao's going to sweep 3-4 rounds when Mayweather does not take 3 or 4 rounds against southpaws? And Manny perhaps is not the offensive buzzsaw he used to be. I think maybe Mayweather would do well to assert himself early in this fight, because Pacquiao looked so confident. And as I said before, Mayweather needs to be made to feel unsure. Well, Pacquiao needs to have that confidence taken away from him. Bernard Hopkins said something similar to what you said a minute ago. As soon as you start thinking about those counters and thinking, what's going to happen next, or I don't really like this, you've lost the fight. And Bernard Hopkins said this about Mayweather against Canelo. If Mayweather can assert himself on Pacquiao early, and Pacquiao can think, oh man, this is Marquez all over again, then he will win the fight.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to just reassert over and over. Well, what do you think are Mayweather's greatest advantages against Pacquiao in this matchup? But actually, you know what? I want to bring up one thing. I have to have one caveat. When you say that Mayweather doesn't adjust against southpaws, I do think he does. I just think he has a more limited tool set from the beginning with which to adjust. So the adjustments are maybe not as noticeable. Like when we see him fight Miguel Cotto, there's a very clear, big adjustment in that fight, where he suddenly realizes halfway through that the overhand right sets up the left uppercut, and he threw it about 3 dozen times in the last 4 rounds of that fight. Once he figured that out, he just kept going to it. He was like, he's open for this punch. He can't figure it out. I'm going to go to the well. That's a very obvious thing, because he didn't throw that weapon at all prior in that fight. Against Robert Guerrero, which I think is a much better fight than it's actually given credit for in terms of just the sort of subtleties that are at play. Guerrero coming in, willing to counter Floyd, having some success with it early, and then Floyd adapting over the course of the fight. The reason it doesn't stand out as much is because Floyd was throwing the lead right hands from the beginning. It was basically his one punch in that fight. It was that fight was a festival of lead right hands and weird, awkward defense that Floyd was doing for 12 rounds straight. But by the 6th, 7th, 8th rounds, those lead right hands were landing almost every single time he threw them, and they weren't landing early. And it's not just because Guerrero had been tired out. It's because Mayweather had basically exhausted a whole slew of options, of ways to make the right hand look different, or to make it feel different, or to move differently beforehand, or to strike different targets, or to throw it in a different path, all these things, and eventually got Guerrero to start guessing and anticipating and expecting and fearing which version of that lead right was going to come next. And then at the very end of the fight, after he's had about 3 or 4 rounds of solid success with the lead right, Mayweather starts hitting him with the left hook too. So he does add layers to it. It's just there are fewer layers, but those layers are sometimes more complex.
I can see what you mean. Maybe what I'm trying to get at is that against orthodox fighters, you usually see him set the pace with the jab to the body and defense to set up the right hand. So everyone's thinking about the left hand, and then boom, 3-4 rounds in, he's right hand, he's hitting you with left hooks, etc., etc. Whereas he would tend to use his seemingly more powerful punches earlier against southpaws, or certainly the more eye-catching shots, the kind of shots that stop a southpaw being a southpaw. Against an orthodox fighter, Floyd tends to let them be themselves for a few rounds before showing them that he can do whatever they want to do. So if a fighter wants to come in and maul him on the inside, Floyd will pretty much smile and laugh at him. And the commentators tend to say, oh, he's smiling, that means that one actually hurt him. No, he is actually enjoying it because he knows full well that soon he's going to beat you on the inside. Or if you want to box him at range, he's going to start getting his timing down, get around your jab. Against a southpaw, I think he knows that he can't really afford to lose as many rounds. So I think that he ups it a lot quicker. So I definitely agree with you that he makes adjustments and he becomes more comfortable with a southpaw as the fight goes on. It's my point that he asserts himself earlier, and I think he needs to get Pacquiao because I think a lot of people are expecting him to fight differently. He already fights different against southpaws. He needs to be the same as he usually is against southpaws. A lot of people are expecting the Floyd's going to come out, try and put it on Manny. Maybe we'll get to that in a second. I can't see that in the biggest fight of Floyd's life, he's going to be take more risks than he did against someone like Robert Guerrero. A lot of people have this misconception that, well, Floyd coasted because Floyd can coast. I don't really buy that. I think Floyd is so smart. He does what he needs to do, not because he thinks I can get away with this, but because he knows that's the right way to do things. And I don't think that he thinks that going at Pacquiao and trying to bomb him out in super featherweight fashion is the thing that he needs to do against Pacquiao. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and if as to your previous point, if we look at boxing again through the lens of teaching and asking, of being a teacher or being a pupil, you could maybe say that against orthodox opponents, Mayweather allows himself to be the pupil a little more. He gives himself some more time early to learn, and he's definitely more the teacher against southpaws. He's really trying to instill these reactions and these and establish threats early, whereas he doesn't really try to threaten with the jab in order to make it set up the right hand so much against orthodox fighters. You know what I mean? He doesn't seem willing to give away rounds against southpaws the way he is against orthodox fighters.
Yeah, man, I'm with that all the way. And to go right back to the earlier part of this video here, you asked, has anyone really used Manny Pacquiao-esque angles against Floyd? And I've been very much of the opinion for a while that Floyd, either through lack of opposition, and people will say, oh, look at all these ex-champions, Hall of Famers he's fought, etc., etc. I'm not saying that Floyd has fought, excuse me, quote-unquote terrible opposition. But there aren't that many fighters out there nowadays that tend to use feints and tend to utilize angles in a way that would trouble someone like Floyd Mayweather. Maybe Manny Pacquiao is an interesting proposition for that reason, because he is a very tricky fighter, and there isn't really anybody like him around today. He's very much an old school kind of fighter, man. You see him using a lot of upper body movement and feints and trying to move people around and coming in and popping out at strange angles and stuff. And yeah, Floyd Mayweather is the consummate ring general, and everybody knows that he's very much an old school stylist. But you know, newsflash, the perfect boxers of the past didn't always school everyone. They didn't school everybody they faced.
That's absolutely true, and I think that's another great comparison through which to look at this fight. We've got Mayweather, who's all about false openings, and Pacquiao, who's all about false threats. Both guys with their own school of thought when it comes to feinting. Both guys with just layers of deception to disguise what is a very dominant style. And I do think, you know, if you look at Mayweather as the defensive virtuoso and Pacquiao as the offensive virtuoso, it only makes it more impressive when you consider how Pacquiao is actually pretty damn good defensively, and Mayweather is pretty damn good offensively too. We've got two very well-rounded fighters here who still oppose each other stylistically. I want to go ahead and ask you now for your final prediction. I think we're nearing the end of our recording time. We've got to give our predictions, and then we can maybe discuss the reasons why we're making those calls.
Oh man, you're just trying to back me into a corner here, man. I feel like you fainted me into a corner now, and I've either got to get out or use my right hand and try and fend you off. But I think you might have got me. I think I have to deliver the check hook and try and smash you into the ropes here, because I'm gonna go. Look, ask me again tomorrow. I'll probably have a different call on it. But maybe when as I said earlier, when this fight was announced, I was kind of cynical about it because I thought that Mayweather had chosen it at the right time. I'm going to stick with my original gut feeling, and I'll man's up and said it 5-6 years ago. I felt that this would be, and man, I'm going to get annihilated in the comments for this, but I actually thought this would be a pretty one-sided fight in favour of Pacquiao, just because he could come through anything and he would throw 100 punches around no matter what you threw back at him. But I do think, as I said in prior discussions about this fight, that Manny is a little bit on the slide now. I think even though he's bounced back tremendously from the shot that Marquez laid him out with, and there's no reason to think that he's got a glass jaw or anything stupid like that, because people assume that if you have a contrary opinion that there's no middle ground or black and white. But I think Manny's still a highly durable, tough, and willing opponent. I do think that Mayweather is going to do enough to win. I think he's going to come with a Castillo Maidana 2-esque performance where he's going to circle. He's going to land right hands. He's going to tie up on the inside when it gets too close, because Manny's not a great infighter. So if Manny does overreach, I think Floyd's going to use that opportunity to Vladimir Klitschko him and grab hold of him and push him off and spin out. Floyd's a bigger guy. I believe, has Floyd got longer reach? Either way, Floyd uses his reach probably better. Floyd's, I'd say, faster with single shots, and I think he's going to use single shots. I would say that Floyd is better at circumnavigating opponents than Manny is at tracking down guys that are moving backwards or side to side. I think the stylistic matchup just about favors Mayweather. And as much as I can see the argument for Manny winning, and I really want to see Manny win this fight for reasons we may discuss it a bit, less boxing related, to be honest with you, than more community related, I guess you could say. I think that Mayweather's going to win a competitive but comfortable decision based on how he approaches southpaws.
He does have a substantial reach advantage, by the way. He's got 5 inches, 5-inch longer on the wingspan than Floyd or than Manny. Some of that may come down to having broader shoulders as well, but I do think he definitely fights like he has longer arms, and it does seem like he has significantly longer arms. Well, Kyle, I'm going to oppose you. I'm going to pick Manny Pacquiao to win this fight. And I truly think that Manny Pacquiao poses a very, very unique and difficult style matchup for Floyd Mayweather. I think not only will he be facing a Mayweather with a lessened degree of skills, techniques, who will go to fewer techniques when and if he finds himself in trouble. I think that Pacquiao, I don't know, man. Let me think of a good way to frame this argument. I will say why I'm picking Pacquiao, why I'm going with, because my gut feeling is Pacquiao, and I will tell you why I'm going with my gut feeling, because I've picked a lot of fights in the past where I backed out because the other guy seemed unbeatable, because the other guy seemed completely imperturbable. I'd never seen him look bad, or he had been looking amazing lately. And to me, that's Floyd Mayweather in this fight. To me, it feels like Manny Pacquiao has the advantage, but I know we've got mostly boxing fans watching this, but I write about MMA as well. And in the UFC, the lightweight champion Anthony Pettis recently was defending his belt against Rafael dos Anjos. And Pettis was an outfighter with good counters, good power, very tricky guy. Much like he's not as nearly as accomplished or as skilled as Floyd Mayweather, but a similar mold. And then opposing him was a pressure fighter. A guy like Rafael dos Anjos came forward, threw heavy punches, took shots well, had better than advertised defense, and he was first and he was last. And I felt like Rafael dos Anjos would win the fight. And then in making my picks, I said, but it's Anthony Pettis, so he's going to lose. And as it turns out, Rafael dos Anjos won every single round of his fight and took Anthony Pettis' title in one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. And I do think that I'm only one of many, many people picking Manny Pacquiao. But I get the sense that there's a much smaller group of people actually believing that Pacquiao will win. In other words, I think most people picking Manny Pacquiao are likely picking against Floyd Mayweather more than they are picking for Manny Pacquiao. And I think that's because we've forgotten how good Manny Pacquiao is. We've seen him against good opposition, and often against opposition that we don't understand how good it is. And that's the case for Floyd too. Marcos Maidana is a very good fighter. So for Floyd to have a competitive fight with him against a tough stylistic matchup from a smart fighter who's better than ever, that's not embarrassing for Floyd. But in the same vein, Manny Pacquiao to go 4 fights with Juan Manuel Marquez, who was not only a counterpuncher, but a serious puncher before getting badly hurt by a punch, is nothing to be ashamed of. And I think everyone agrees that Manny Pacquiao was winning the rounds in that fight before getting stopped by Marquez. So it's not like he looked bad. In fact, he looked a lot like his old self. He looked more aggressive. He looked sharp on the counters. His footwork was good. His angles were good. He looked pretty solid. Losing a decision to Tim Bradley, getting stunned for a moment by Tim Bradley in their second fight, that's just people not realizing the potential that Tim Bradley has. We've seen Tim Bradley in some close fights, but to me, Tim Bradley is an absolute top-tier fighter. He's very, very difficult, as proven by how good of a fight he gave Juan Manuel Marquez in what I think was one of Marquez's most well-rounded ever performances. Marquez came forward against Tim Bradley better than he's ever come forward against opponents before in his career, and Bradley still beat him. So, you know, we tend to write off guys when they lose, and that's the big downfall of the Floyd Mayweather era, because losses do not mean failure. Losses mean being challenged.
Yeah.
Losses mean challenge, and I think that Manny Pacquiao has already proven that he can come back from a loss. He'd already, you know, the whole great glory years of his career that we remember so fondly, those came after losses. He'd been knocked out twice before those many glory years of Manny Pacquiao fighting, and still recovered and got better, consistently better. And before I toss it over to you for a rebuttal, Kyle, I will say there's been a lot of talk about speed. Who's faster? Who's lost their speed? Who's lost their legs? Who doesn't have it anymore? And first of all, speed isn't everything. Both of these guys are great rhythmic manipulators. Both of these guys have been able to make opponents look slow and befuddled, not because they're so fast, but because their opponents think one thing is coming and then something else comes, or they think it's coming at a certain time and they can't predict it. They either come before it's expected or even after it's expected. You can actually go slower than expected. You can hesitate an attack, as Floyd often does with his lead right, or as Manny often does with his lead left, and make it work because it comes later than they thought it would. So it's not all about speed. But I think that Floyd Mayweather has lost more of his speed than Manny Pacquiao. I know you disagree with this, Kyle, so I'll throw it to you in a minute. But to me, I've seen many fights throughout Manny Pacquiao's career where he has looked off balance, where he has looked weird and sluggish. He looked awkwardly sluggish in his first fight with Eric Morales, which was after having drubbed Marco Antonio Barrera very impressively in one of his fastest ever fights. He looked awkwardly slow. He looked off balance. He was flinging himself around. He was reaching on punches. That's something he's done now, and people have said, okay, well, that's not good. It's not a good sign. He can't cover distance the way he used to. But he's kind of always done that. Manny Pacquiao's career has always had these weird ups and downs where it seems to be, how much is he really invested in this performance? How much does he care? How fired up does he feel? And I think Manny Pacquiao is an essentially emotional fighter. When Manny Pacquiao gets hit, he seems to get charged up and really come back. He is a fighter in the pure sense. And so I think that a challenge really brings out the best in Manny Pacquiao. I think it's been a long time since Pacquiao's been an underdog. And I think his underdog performances have always been his best. Underdog or closely matched. You know what I mean? It's been a long time since anyone's felt like Manny Pacquiao was even really closely matched with a guy. And those have always been his best. Miguel Cotto, Ricky Hatton, Marco Antonio Barrera, the second and third fights with Eric Morales. Those are always the second fight with Juan Manuel Marquez. When Manny Pacquiao is not expected to win, or when it's expected to be tough, he does very, very well. Meanwhile, I've seen Floyd Mayweather fail to land punches on opponents that I think he would have hit very easily 3 or 4 years ago. I just got done saying that Marcos Maidana is much better than people think he is, and that's still true. But he's also very slow, and I think anyone who watches him can see that. He's a slow fighter. And yet Marcos Maidana was rolling Floyd Mayweather's right hands by the end of their fight. Marcos Maidana hit Floyd Mayweather with a counter 1-2 that I don't think Floyd Mayweather would have walked into a few years ago. And it's tough to analyze Floyd because we're looking at a guy who's unbeaten. We are analyzing tiny little cracks in what has proven so far to be an all but impenetrable armor. So these tiny flaws stand out more because there are so few of them. So it's quite possible that I'm overstating these little failures and that Mayweather comes in here, outboxes Pacquiao. But I think it's a tough style matchup for him. And I think it's a uniquely tough style matchup. And I think Manny Pacquiao right now is a better boxer than Floyd Mayweather. I think that Mayweather may have waited too long to take this fight, and Pacquiao still has it. Okay, Kyle, what do you say about that?
Well, man, we spoke about this before, off air and off the record, so to speak. And I made the case to you that, in my opinion, the Margarito fight was probably the last time we've seen Pacquiao really, really punch with the ferocity that he used to. people in the comments are going to say it's to do with a change in conditioner and etc. etc. And I don't mean the stuff that cleans your hair. And I think that a lot of people are going to say that, but as you correctly said, there are performances and there are other ones apart from the first. I mean, I think the first Morales fight, there were times, as you say, as soon as he got hit, that he came back. I think Oscar Larios was coming off basically a quick job against Israel Vasquez because he was already confirmed to have a fight with Pacquiao, and Pacquiao basically went through the motions. In the second Barrera fight, Pacquiao had already destroyed him, so he just sort of went through the motions. In the Joshua Clottey fight, Clottey wasn't doing anything, and he just had a high guard, so Pacquiao went through the motions. But I personally feel that offensively, since the Margarito fight, which Pacquiao keeps saying is one of his hardest fights of all time, or the hardest fight he's ever had. And hey, look, man, he unloaded on Margarito for 12 rounds and he got hurt really badly to the body. And Pacquiao's always said, man, this is the hardest fight in my career. Even though as spectators, we tend to say that was a masterclass from Manny with a few rough patches. It must have been a really torrential sort of storm he was facing in that fight. I've said to you before, man, I'm not sure that Pacquiao really punches the same way he used to. The hand speed's still there to an extent. The skill's still there. Seems a bit more upright now. I think when he used to get a bit lower as he would really get putting steam into his punches. But even though Shane Mosley has attested to the fact that he got hurt by one of Manny's shots, and we've seen Bradley get buzzed around so badly, he hurt his ankle. We've seen Algieri go down multiple times, even when Manny's overreaching and caught him on the end of a punch rather than punching through a target. I tend to feel that Manny doesn't really punch through the target anymore. He punches to the target. But, and this is the important thing, this is the kind of fight where Manny is going to be on his A game. Now, I personally think that Manny is looking quite light. And usually when he's the lighter man, he is in his element at home with the fight, because he's usually fighting a guy who's a lot bigger and therefore cumbersome. Against Floyd Mayweather, I don't feel that, even though Floyd is substantially the larger man, and look, it's like we can't possibly know until the fight or even the weigh-in tomorrow or the night of the fight, but it looks to me like Mayweather's packed on a bit more muscle than usual, so he might actually be cutting down to make weight this time. I mean, he was on 150 pounds a few weeks ago, so he's not going to be draining down from 160, but I get the feeling that Mayweather is looking for a bit of extra strength in this fight. This is one of the times when Manny's going to be not only substantially, or the smaller man at least, but he's also not going to be the out-and-out faster guy. And I think that Mayweather is still relatively fast. I think his feet are still relatively fast, even though Maidana caught him and Maidana caused him hassle. I think in the second fight, really, I think that even if Floyd wasn't as fast pulling the trigger in terms of his foot speed, which I think is the key in this fight, he was still relatively fast. He could certainly, he's still very sturdy still on his legs. You know what I mean? So, and I think causing Manny to overreach, as we said before, that is what causes Manny to get sloppy. I just think that Floyd can still do what he needs to do more so than Manny can. I think in the second Maidana fight, it was very similar to the second fight with Jose Luis Castillo, which everybody says was a Floyd masterclass. In a way it was, but I find it a very negative, stinky kind of performance. He did what he needed to do. He knew that he could win quite easily if he didn't engage as much. And I definitely think, sadly, that that's what he's going to do against Manny Pacquiao. And I really want Manny Pacquiao to win, man. Look, we are supposed to be objective analysts. We also are fight fans. And I want Manny Pacquiao to win. I'm not a Floyd hater or anything like that. I really appreciate Floyd Mayweather. But Floyd fans, I'm a Floyd fan. But the majority of you, I hate you. I can't stand conversing with you. I can't stand talking to you. To quote, unquote, Floyd Mayweather, you don't know shit about boxing, and I'd be very happy if Floyd lost. You would lose all your ammunition, and hopefully, excuse my language, SB Nation, but hopefully you'd fuck off, because I can't be dealing with listening to your opinions anymore. So from a personal point of view, I'd like Manny to win just to free up a bit of breathing space in conversations, because it always seems to come around to this ludicrous idea that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest of all time. But we are objective analysts, Connor, and I do think that Mayweather's got enough left to beat Manny Pacquiao.
I think you're making an emotional pick, Kyle. I think you're making an emotional pick because you feel like it's hopeless at this point. You want Mayweather to lose, and you feel like it's not going to happen. I think you've got preemptive underdog bias, something like that.
Maybe I'm so pessimistic that I've talked myself round to, because as I've said to you before, man, I concede that Manny Pacquiao is a difficult style for Mayweather, and I concede that Mayweather, as much as people are going to have a go at me, he doesn't tend to fight guys that can feint him out of position. when Shane Mosley did a pretty easy thing, double feint a jab and then come across to a right hand, which is something that Tommy Hearns would have destroyed Mayweather with in pretty short fashion. Mayweather did get hit, and yes, he made the adjustments. He did make. He got hit twice.
He loves naked leads and single shots. That's kind of what he
and
lives off of.
Guys that come straight on. So he's the man with the angles. Yeah. He's the man slipping. Manny Pacquiao, man, he has got the minerals to test Floyd Mayweather. He might have the minerals to beat him, man. I really hope he does. But I honestly think, man, that when's the last time the good guy won? When was the last time the good guy won?
I'll say one more thing, which may be a bit controversial too, before we wrap it up. I think the last time Manny Pacquiao fought a guy who was as fast as him, I think maybe Tim Bradley was probably as fast as him, though not certainly in the same kind of explosive, powerful way. And not in the second fight where Tim Bradley was biting down in his mouthpiece and trying to blast Manny Pacquiao out of there. But the first Tim Bradley fight, they were probably comparable in speed. I also think that Miguel Cotto, at least for the first 3 or 4 rounds of their fight, was matching Manny for speed. And I think it's very, very important to look at that fight and see how Pacquiao beat Miguel Cotto, because this will undermine what has been a fundamental misunderstanding of Manny Pacquiao's style. Because he's such a relentless force of nature kind of fighter, we tend to think of him as just an instinctive guy. He goes in there, he's basically brawling with slightly better technique. Against Miguel Cotto, he built his victory piece by piece and deconstructed Miguel Cotto. At the beginning of that fight, Miguel Cotto was winning rounds, was landing left hooks and jabs, was attacking Pacquiao's body, was avoiding the left hand. He really was very, very difficult to hit. I don't think Manny hit him with more than 2 or 3 clean punches in the first round of that fight. Manny started to mix up his offense. He started to add feints. He started to take angles. He started to attack the body. He started to mix uppercuts, wide left hands, overhands, and straights. He started to use his jab to blind Cotto. He started throwing right uppercuts after Cotto ducked under the left straight. He started to layer his offense. And by the end of that fight, Manny Pacquiao could not miss by the end of that fight. Miguel Cotto was a sitting duck and was getting beaten up. And so I think that is the key ingredient to the recipe to beating Floyd Mayweather. You have to attack in layers, and you have to be indefatigable. You have to be able to come up against a guy who is going to stop the first layer, the second layer, even the third layer of your offense, and you have to still say, okay, I'll put something else behind it. I'm still learning from these failures. These aren't failures. These are just lessons. I think Manny Pacquiao truly is a thoughtful fighter. I think he has good ring IQ. I think he figures things out, especially when everything is on the line, as it was against Miguel Cotto. So I really think that's a strong advantage for him here. And I hope he wins the fight. But I also think he will win the fight. And I don't really dislike Floyd Mayweather. I know I probably should, but I don't like the way people really bully Floyd Mayweather a lot because he's so hard to like. People mock him for being illiterate and various other things about his personality. I don't really hate him, maybe as much as I should, but Manny Pacquiao is no saint either. Manny Pacquiao is a serial philanderer, and he opposes contraception and birth control for poor women, and he's got a lot of controversial aspects about his personality. So neither of these guys are saints, but just in terms of stylistic matchup, I think Manny Pacquiao's got the advantage here.
Well, man, I'm with you. As I said before, I can see that. Funnily enough, so we just to wrap it up on my side. So we touched on before. I see the Freddie Roach touched on exactly the same thing. So Freddie Roach, you're nearly as smart as me. He said that Floyd doesn't turn the counter when you're throwing. He waits, and that's exactly what we said. We said that. So Floyd,
Freddie's been watching our videos.
He must have done. I don't think he's got time for that, man. But look, man, look. I'm not trying to act like a smart guy, Freddie Roach. I'm just saying, if Freddie Roach has noticed something that we have as well, it means it's there. It's not. We're not picking Floyd apart unfairly. Floyd is the kind of guy who waits until you finish before he starts countering you. He's not the kind of guy who's gonna. If you see the Philip Endale fight, Endale's throwing punches at him and he's waiting, and then he pops off a shot here and there, and he's basically having fun with it. He's not having fun with Manny Pacquiao. So I do think, hey, to go back to what I said at the beginning of the video, I was jaded, I was cynical. But the fight's here, and I can't fucking wait, man.
Fighting Manny Pacquiao is not fun. Fighting Floyd Mayweather is not fun. But I do expect this to be a fun fight for everyone watching. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this final episode of Figuring Out the Fight. Hopefully, we'll be able to revive this series for big fights in the future. We can do episodes leading up to other matchups. We won't have time before Canelo Kirkland, which is a great fight, but we've got some big ones coming later this year that we'll talk about in advance. Please come back to this channel after the fight. We are going to be doing the 13th round, a special immediate post view of the fight, if you will, the opposite of a preview. We're going to be recapping. We're going to be discussing. We're probably going to have some viscerally emotional reactions to whatever has happened, whether Mayweather wins or Pacquiao wins. So come back to MMANation.com on YouTube after the fight on May 2nd, May 3rd by that point, and join us for some fun discussion. And thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to read more Mayweather versus Pacquiao analysis or see the rest of this series, you can find those videos on badlefthook.com. Lots of boxing coverage over there. Please do me a favor. Check out my video series, Secret Weapons, on badlefthook.com. You can find the whole stream with all 6 installments. I've looked at what I consider to be some of the most underrated or misunderstood techniques of both Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. Really proud of the series. So check it out if you want to learn some technical details about these guys. And if you want to get at Kyle and myself on social media, you can do that on Twitter. I am at BoxingBush. Kyle, your Twitter handle?
It's at Ferocious Flea. And guys, if you didn't hear Connor there, it's B-U-S-C-H.
B-U-S-C-H. Yes, it's the awkwardly spelled version. Thanks once again, everybody, for joining us. We hope the fight is good. You hope the fight is good. There's nothing left to do now but wait. So enjoy the fight.